The Honourable Leader of the Second Opposition.
Madam Speaker, it is an honour to rise and speak in remembrance as we approach the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War on November 11th, 1918. It may be difficult now to imagine the sheer horror and destruction of those wars which left so many million dead and so many young lives cut short. Today is also Aboriginal Veterans Day, and we should recall the thousands of Aboriginal Canadians who fought and died only to return home and find the rights that they fought for others were denied to them. Manitobans signed up for service in extraordinary numbers, and tributes to their sacrifice are seen not just outside this chamber on the Rotunda mural, but down Memorial Boulevard, out the front steps of this legislature, and in memorials and cenotaphs in every town in Manitoba. I have many relatives who served in conflicts, in combat, non-combat, and in civilian support. They were lucky, and I am lucky because they survived, as so many did not. On my mother's side, my maternal grandfather, Robert Barrett, was born in 1899 and served in both the First and Second World Wars. His older brother, Alfred Barrett, had moved to Alberta, then enlisted with the Canadian Field Artillery and returned to Europe. He was killed in action at Vimy, but his final resting place is still unknown. Another great uncle, Jack Clark, was awarded the George Medal. In 1941, on a training flight, he was shot down by fighters. His plane crashed, and he returned to the burning wreckage to pull his instructor and save him. On my father's side, my great-uncle Frank Baston grew up in Winnipeg. He was part of the Canadian shock troops and fought at the Somme and at Vimy, and he wrote of his experience at the Somme. He wrote, quote, "When our artillery barrage opened at 0 hour, the hail of bullets and shrapnel facing us was terrific. It was like facing a blizzard, with the constant buzz of machine gun bullets and the crack of those passing close to one's head, and the explosions of shrapnel shells adding to the clamor. I trudged steadily forward and got several hundred yards when I realized that I was all alone. The battalion entered this battle about 900 strong, and we numbered just over 100 when we reached our billets late that night." He added, "I met the finest men I have ever known in the 3rd Battalion. An idea promulgated by pacifists is that good soldiers must be insensitive and brutal, but this is quite wrong. Self-control, intelligence, and keen perception are the qualities which make men outstanding in war and in peace." In late August 1918, Frank was shot in action, and a telegram was sent to his family reporting that he was dead. A few weeks later, they received a second, much happier telegram from him, telling them that he was alive. He lived to a ripe old age, and as a judge made a landmark ruling that made an impression on Canadian culture. He ruled that hockey fights are legal. My uncle and an aunt were both in forces in the Second World War, but did not see combat. But while we often focus on the First and Second World War, it is critical to remember conflicts like Korea, the First Gulf War, Yugoslavia, and Afghanistan. My sister, Alexandra, was a civilian serving in Kabul, Afghanistan, during the conflict there for 3 years, working with the RCMP, training Afghan police. At the end of his life, my great-uncle Frank Baston was on his deathbed, and he was repeating the same thing over and over again. It took a while for our family to make it out, but he was saying, "I just want to do my duty and not be afraid." My paternal grandfather, John Badlamont, who was a Liberal MLA for Iberville in the late 1930s, also fought in the First War in France and at Mons in Belgium. And just after the peace, 100 years ago, the armistice that we are marking, he wrote a letter home to his family from Belgium. The war had just ended, and he passed the body of an enemy soldier who had been killed in the last hours of the war. A few hours later, he passed the body again, and the boots had been stolen, and it was raining. He looked at the bare feet of his dead foe in the rain and thought how easily it could have been him. In the midst of the horror of war, we need to recall the common humanity we all share. We remember on November 11th to recognize the sacrifice of those who fought and died. We owe it to them and to ourselves to ensure that those who fought and died did not fight and die in vain, but for a better world. It is up to us to honor them by building that better world. We need to stand up to fight when it matters and be willing to beat our swords into plowshares when the battle is done. Thank you, Madam Speaker.